Hello, I'm Allison Thorpe, and this is God Talk, recorded and produced in the bluegrass state of Kentucky, the home of horses, hills, hiking, hillbillies, big trucks, Wildcat basketball, and Daniel Boone, the state where guns are honored and shoes are optional. This is the show where science, faith, and culture are discussed openly.
Welcome to God Talk, a radio show where a rocket scientist and a medical doctor, who is also my pastor, talk about science and religion. I'm your host, Doug Thorpe, and with me as always is my co-host, Dr. Andy White. Today on God Talk, we discuss the afterlife with guest Brother Gary Joseph. Dr. Andy, welcome to the show.
Well, hello, Doug. I'm really excited about this show because I think probably of all the topics we talk about, I would say the afterlife, near-death experiences, and working towards proving that there is a soul, a part of the human body that's not material. It's probably one of my favorites. So I'm really excited because this guest has had a famous near-death experience, and he's going to come on the show today, talk about his experience, how it affected him, and how his life has been ever since. But first, this is God Talk, where we rightly divide the line between science and faith.
And this is God Talk, your partner while you commute to work, or a cure for the insomnia. Either it keeps you awake all night and you forget about needing sleep, or you'll sleep like a baby. You can find us at god-talk.com. You can find our audios on SoundCloud, and you can find our videos on YouTube.
And of course, iTunes is probably our primary source.
Absolutely, iTunes.
iTunes. So find us, and you just go to our website, god-talk.com. So in a minute, we're going to bring on Brother Gary. Our guest, Brother Gary Joseph, are you with us?
I'm here.
Excellent. From California, right?
Yes, Los Angeles area, in fact.
Okay, so it's a little earlier there. We're about 3 hours difference, but it's a little later here for us.
So Dr. Andy has let me know that you've experienced a near-death experience, and you've been doing some things before and doing after. So we want to know your background. So please give me your upbringing, your education, your religious background. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, yeah, I had a near-death experience, as you said. It was in 2005, and it was a sudden heart attack a few weeks after thyroid surgery. And I had been raised Catholic. I was active in the church as a kid, and so I had quite an experience with God in my early years. And then I guess after that, I had some conversion, ongoing experience, like at a Billy Graham rally. I went to see him in Cleveland in the 70s and responded to an altar call. And then from after that, I ended up going to some Bible schools. I went to Central Bible College in Springfield, Missouri. I graduated with my master's in biblical studies. And then I went on to a Catholic college. I did PhD work in moral law and ethics. And evolved into the business world right after that. When I was in Pittsburgh at Duquesne, I got recruited there by a new startup in the 80s. It was called People Express. A lot of people might remember. It was a low-cost carrier, and myself and my cousin, we were startup founders of the airline, and then spent my whole career, up until the near-death experience, I spent my whole career in airline consulting, hotels, and even the government sector. I worked for Penn State University for about 15 years as a human resource consultant.
Okay, well, let me, how about another one? How has your near-death experience impacted your life, and has it changed your personality? Do you have new abilities, or perceptions, or intuitions, or has it helped you?
Yeah, we'll get into the details of the NDE in a minute, brother, but we kind of want to know, like, before your life, you were, what were you doing, and then after your life, was it significantly different? We can get into the details later. We kind of want to know how did this impact you before we even talk about what happened?
Well, I had this real passion for human resource training and development, guest service. So that was really where my enthusiasm was. And that's probably, I guess, with most people that maybe like you gentlemen have your careers in medicine and physics, that you get passionate about something.
Absolutely.
But then I had the near-death experience in September of '05, and immediately the next day I was completely different. I had no interest in my career field.
Wow.
I quickly left the field, and within a few days I was unemployed and basically hearing messages in the night, as well as sometimes I'd be wide awake. I'd hear messages like go help the homeless, and I would call my family. They'd talk to me, and they did not recognize me. I was doing things and saying things that it was totally out of personality for me.
So, Brother Gary, for our audience, to say that you were different or that your life was impacted by having this near-death experience would be an understatement. I mean, it sounds like you were radically changed.
Well, wait a minute.
And I eventually went to, within a year of that, I went to St. John's Seminary, a Catholic seminary, and I finished my Catholic training because I had all the degrees through Protestant seminary. So here I go to this Catholic seminary, St. John's, and the leaders there said, you're different. And I was pulled into private conference and meetings with these leaders of the seminary. And I said, if you guys have trouble with me and you think I'm different, I said, try being me. I said, because
yeah.
I said, I'm wrestling with the same thing you guys are wrestling with, and probably even more.
Well, you mentioned this was in 2005, 10
Right.
years ago, which would have put your age at the same, between me and you.
In his early 50s.
Early 50s, yeah. I would be a year older and you would be a year younger. So, yeah, it's our age.
You think about where he would have been in his life at that point.
Yeah,
which
I can
is a good
imagine.
Point. Put it into context.
Yeah, I can't imagine quitting, my job and doing something differently.
He's kind of in the peak of his life. That's why I'm really interested in finding that. And so, before we get into actually what happened, it's kind of like you've got this person, Gary Joseph, and he's going along in his life. And I assume you did believe in God before the NDE, it sounds like, from what you were talking about from the training. So that wasn't different.
I did. I just wasn't, because I got sidetracked into the business field, I just wasn't, I wasn't that
pious
that person that,
yeah, wasn't as enthusiastic, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so, he had a spiritual life. I mean, that's an important point. But it wasn't the focus of his life before this. Now tell me, next question here is, just take us through the experience of how you died, and how it happened, and how long were you clinically dead, and we'll just start with that.
Yeah, that's kind of important.
How did it happen? And as a doctor, I want to know some of those details. So.
Well, it's interesting because it wasn't until this past summer, in the months of June, July, that the endocrinologist that was with me now for about 3 years, he began to really piece together what the issues are since the thyroid surgery. And so really I've been living now 10 years, medically speaking, I've been living with not knowing why that happened until just this past few months. They figured it out, and they finally corrected it with medication, because I was still having palpitations and arrhythmias for the past 10 years.
So you had some hyperthyroidism or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. They misdiagnosed prior to 2005. They misdiagnosed for 5 years a thyroid tumor that was growing interior, and so they never saw it. And it was ultimately the size of a golf ball. So they Cedars in LA called me all apologetic in '05 in the summer, and they said one of our students at USC, they accidentally for school were working on things, and they actually found this tumor in your X-rays. So they had sent me home in March saying I was fine, and then all of a sudden, God bless the student, he finds out that I'm not fine.
Sure, that happens sometimes.
Yeah, so I end up being quickly taken to surgery in August of '05. They took out the half that had the golf ball-sized tumor, discovered it was not cancer, and just about 4 or 5 weeks after that surgery, I was up, couldn't sleep, felt high energy, and here the thyroid, now in hindsight, they believe was cycling, and they probably, in hindsight, now think I should have been put on Synthroid after that surgery, but I was not. They should have probably put me on a light dose of it.
Yeah.
And so the half of thyroid that was left behind was cycling. It was sometimes hyper. It was sometimes under. And so I end up with this cycle of hyper that the heart just takes off like it's racing on September 26th. And I had no time. People said, why don't you call 911? And I said, well, that sounds good. It's just sometimes the person cannot do it. It happens so fast, the heart attack, that they cannot even think of those kinds of things.
Absolutely.
And in my case, what I was most aware of in that quick instant of the heart attack is that I was standing in the living room. It was 1:15 in the morning, and I was going to watch TV because, like I said, I had high energy. I couldn't sleep. And the clock on the DVD said one. Yeah, the clock says 1:15 in the morning, and it's at that exact instant that the heart takes off, and it's at that exact instant that I'm thinking about this huge presence that's in the living room. It's like this huge, gigantic person and personality is. So I'm more aware of that than I am of the heart attack. And so as the heart attack progressed, I collapsed on the floor, and I was completely aware of the heart pounding out of my chest. And I was also completely aware of when it stopped. When it stopped, it left me with, if a person's ever been on a noisy train or a noisy bus and the conductor turns it off and everything goes peaceful, that's exactly what my sensation was. When the heart finally stopped, I just remember this peace and calm. And the next thing I knew, I had the awareness that all the electricity in my body was going out my feet and my hands. So there was a short instant where I was aware that I was still in my body, but no heartbeat.
Wow. That's fascinating to me. That is just...
Yeah, and in that short instant, I'm laying there on the floor thinking, I'm feeling the electricity leave the hands and the feet. It actually goes out through the extremities. And I said to myself, this must be it. I must be dead. And then the next thing, I was in the ceiling area, and I could see myself laying on the living room floor, and it was peaceful. And at the same time, I was also aware of this huge presence that was still there in the room with me.
Now, can we stop you a minute, brother, just for a second? It's just really fascinating to me to talk to somebody who's gone through this. I mean, I've dealt with so many. I've worked as an emergency room doctor for years and have dealt with so many I've seen, witnessed this and treated this so many times.
From the other side.
From the other side, obviously, I've never had an NDE, but and I've spoken with other people that have had them, that have been patients, but never in depth like this. And so it fascinates me that when the tachycardia, that's the fast palpitations, took off, and if anybody listening to this has ever had an arrhythmia, a heart arrhythmia, where your heart's beating 250 times a minute, wow. I mean, you talk about scary. Yeah. I mean, it is an overwhelming presence of, not a presence of a person, but a feeling of impending kind of doom. I mean, it's like, it's just for your heart to beat. And then, but it sounds like the transition from life to death was basically seamless. I mean, you knew you were in your body.
And your heart's pounding like crazy. Yeah, it's going very fast and pumping blood very good. And then all of a sudden, nothing.
Yeah, like the train was a great way to hear that. I've never heard anybody put that. The train conductor shuts off the train and all this noise goes to silence. So he's aware of the fact that he's in his body and his heart's not beating.
All right. So how long was that between the time the heart is pounding and going like mad to the heart stops?
And then he's up in the ceiling.
And he's up in, until he starts, because there's got to be some time where it's going to take for your, the blood to, quit being effective in your brain and you start dying, right?
Sure. So basically, it sounds to me like it was only a matter of seconds to where he transitioned, right? Is that right?
To me, that whole segment was just, it felt like seconds. It happened so fast from being there in the room to all of a sudden collapsed on the floor. And I think one of the biggest things for me was, even while I was standing and in 1 or 2 seconds that the heart took off, I was actually aware of this huge person coming into the room. So almost a split second before it all started, I was also aware of this enormous person coming into the...
Before he died.
Before he died, he knew of a presence. Okay.
And I have heard other people, I just want to inject here, people who have undergone, I know of one that was a traumatic a car wreck, and basically they went through the window and were thrown out onto the street, and this person that had an NDE type experience told me that they actually were taken out of their body before their body flew through the windshield. In other words, God spared them from that. They were gone before their body went out and hit the pavement. Now, I mean, that's just an experience, but point being that, as you get close to the moment of death, it sounds like the spiritual realm becomes evident in some people. He's not the only person I've heard say that.
And in my situation, Andy and Doug, the other thing that happened was I became, through that experience, really completely aware of how really separable I am. My parts can be separated. And so when I came back, I was really aware of this fact that we have body, soul, spirit. I was before that I wasn't aware of those three components. But after I was gone and came back, I just really felt like my spirit and my soul were just driving in a car, as they were just occupying a vehicle. And so it was really after that, over the past 10 years now, that I've had multiple separations from my body. I ended up at a church in Egypt a few years ago, right before the holiday bombing of that church. And I was there and I met the young people. I've had at random different separations of myself from my body.
It's almost like a shoulder separation. When somebody separates their shoulder and dislocates their shoulder, and puts it back in, it's much easier for it to pop out. It sounds like your soul
Yeah.
can pop out.
Well, just let me back up here a little quick. How long were you clinically dead? And was there anybody else anybody else in the room with you to revive you?
Well, it's interesting you ask about the time because I was more or less given the gift to have that DVD clock when it started. It was, had I been anywhere else in the house, I wouldn't have had the clock. So I knew it was 1:15. And after I met God the Father through a screen. He was hidden behind a gray screen, and then Christ after that came and he hugged and held me. But when I revived after the hug, it was the clock. My eyes opened and the clock was right in front of me. It was 1:45, and to the minute it was 30 minutes that I was gone.
Well, let's go back to where you're. We've sidetracked. It's going to be easy to do, but when you were up at the ceiling, you were looking down at your body, and I've always wanted to ask somebody, did you realize at that moment, I'm dead? Or did you think, who's that laying there? Or did you wonder what was going on? Did you have awareness? I mean, what was that like?
Yeah, I was aware that I was dead, and at the same time, I was immensely aware of the presence, this huge presence, which I still had yet not identified as God. I knew it was big, I just didn't know yet who it was. Wow. So, I was aware of what was going on, but I was probably more fascinated by this enormous presence that really came in 1 or 2 seconds before it all started.
Could you control your motion, or if you floated up? I mean, could you control that, or was that just floating up and you're basically floating?
Yeah, just a natural thing that happened, or?
Well, I kind of took some kind of reference from my spirituality because I was overwhelmed when I realized it was God the Father who was coming to receive me. And at that point, I said, "Glory to God in the highest and peace to your people on earth." And I chose those words inexplicably, I don't know why, to control my emotion or to express my emotion. And I kept saying it over and over and over as he revealed himself behind this gray screen. So why I chose glory to God in the highest, peace to your people on earth, but in the same respect, it was a joyous moment. And in hindsight, I realized that was the song that the angels had sang at the time of the birth of Christ.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, Brother Gary, before we get to the experience of God, how did you know, or did it feel, because people always ask this about NDEs, and they say, how do you know it wasn't a dream, or how did it feel to you? I mean, I know you were overwhelmed by the presence of God, and that, maybe that's just all you can feel is the presence of God so overwhelming. But I just wonder for our listeners, with an NDE, does it feel like reality, or does it feel like a dream, or how does that? What's that like?
Good question.
Well, yeah, it's a good question that you have, and I wrestled with that beginning the next day because I knew what had happened to me, but I started to doubt because there's the past reference that I had that there's dreams and there's these things that happen. So there's the doubts that come in because I had these other memories and I never had this happen. So it was hard to believe it. So I could see why people would share those questions because I had the same questions. But here is how I ultimately validated it. Was one way was by the fact that I would go to like a a grocery store in the days after, or I would be at a pharmacy picking up prescription. And for 2-3 years after that near-death experience, not once, not twice, but dozens of times, people that don't even know me, they never met me in their life, would just stare at me and say, "What's going on? Who are you? What's your name?" I would just have these really strange encounters with people, and then I would ask them the question, "Why are you asking me this?" And they'd say, "Well, you look like really peaceful, or you look like you just really had a wonderful vacation," or they'd have all these reasons why they wanted to engage me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, can you tell us?
Were you finished with that, or are you still going?
Well, that was probably one of the things, and then, of course, my mom's reaction, because she just totally did not recognize me, your own family member. So it was things like this. And then my band, I was in a church band, had just joined in the summer, and at Christmas, they nominated one of the guitar players to come up at the Christmas party, and they said to me, "Okay, so what's your story? We want to know what's going on."
Yeah. Well, tell me this. I just want to make sure we get clear on. But it did feel like reality, or did it feel? I mean, when you're in that state of dead, but your soul's separate from your body. We kind of got sidetracked. I want to make sure how it feels. Does it feel real, or
I'm totally aware of myself, and it's not like what sometimes Eastern and Buddhists thought, where maybe the person becomes part of the universe or something. It's not like that at all. The person remains themselves, and I remains my own person.
Okay, still had an identity.
And my own, and my own thinking, and my own thinking process as well.
Okay. One quick question: how long were you in the hospital after this?
I ended up seeing my family physician a few days afterwards, who was a wonderful 20-some year experience Jewish man who was my family physician, and he said that after he heard what had happened, he said, I think it had something to do with your thyroid surgery, and he said, I think it's something that the thyroid that's left behind overreacted. He said, if you keep having these experiences, he says, we'll have to put you on a Holter monitor. I said, Doc, I hope I don't keep having these. I said, how many times can you die,
Well, yeah. And I understand this, because if you have an arrhythmia, where your heart's beating that fast, basically what happens is the heart starts beating so fast there's no output from it. So what you were probably in was like ventricular tachycardia or supraventricular tachycardia. And when that happens, the heart beats so fast that it's not able to fill. And when it can't fill, it's not able to have any cardiac output. So your cardiac output drops, essentially, and your heart stops. It basically stops. And so during that time, right? Yeah. Is that what you basically experienced?
And it can start on
Doctor,
its own?
what they finally figured out just recently was it was good what they did a few days after that experience. The family physician put me on beta blockers. So now I've been daily on beta blockers since that event in 2005. And it wasn't until the endocrinologist this past June, he figured out that I really should be on a low-dose Synthroid. So ever since now I started taking Synthroid, it has leveled off the tachycardia and the arrhythmias, because I was having those, not as dramatic, but I was still having that for 10 years now.
Yeah.
And here it was all related to that thyroid surgery.
So basically, you had cardiac arrest, is what you had, where your heart was in a ventricular tachycardia or some kind of arrhythmia to the point where your heart stopped. You were dead clinically during that time, and then your heart restarted. It started back, and your soul came back into your body. Let's go back to where you were. You said you were above the body. You were out of your body. You were looking at yourself, and then you sensed this being during the time that you were clinically dead. Tell us what happened next then, and what did you experience?
The very first event was that I left the living room in the ceiling area, and I was standing before a huge gray screen, similar to a screen door, and it was much more dark gray and opaque, but there were small pieces of brilliant light that were piercing the screen. So I kept looking at these pieces of bright light, and that's when I began to say, "Glory to God in the highest, peace to your people on earth." And I really became aware that this was God the Father, and He confirmed who He was by identifying Himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So I knew that here I was with the person that I had gone to Central Bible College. I had learned about who He is, and now I was standing there in front of this gray screen, and that was Him on the other side. And I asked Him up front if I could see Him, and he used the word no, just a flat no. And then he paused, and right after that he said, "No." He said, "You cannot see me, because if you see me, you'll be dead." And so I dropped that subject, and then I just stood there appreciating the protection of the gray screen, because I was beginning to feel consumed. The longer that I was there and the light pierced, it would rip open the screen. And whenever the light did that, I began to feel overwhelmed, like I was being consumed. And so I was becoming more grateful that He did not remove the screen, and I was beginning to sort of like it, that it was there.
It was an overpowering thing then. Would you describe it that way?
Overpowering and overwhelming. And then the Father began to talk to me about being a father, but He doesn't talk, and he gives his talk, He gives it in a different way than we do, because like when we talk as humans, we talk in a linear way, but the Father talked to me more kind of like a sponge. If you take a dry sponge and it goes under a sink of a faucet of water, the water just spreads throughout the sponge instantly. And so when He was talking to me about Him being a father, He spoke in that fashion where it was just absorption instantaneously. And He was talking to me about that the example of being a father, He said, is very similar to your mother and father on earth. He said, I'm the same way. He said, I'm your father, you're my children. And He said, I created you. And He said, I'm just like your father. I have expectation. And He used the word duty a few times. He said that I have a duty for you, and you are to fulfill the duty that I give you. And He used the example, when I was a kid, we had an extra big yard, and our duty was to cut the grass. And he said, just like when you were living with your dad and your duty was to cut the grass, he said, that's the kind of expectation and responsibility that you have towards me as your father.
Are you afraid to die?
No, not at all now.
Really?
It's sort of a different life now. And I used to be a lot, but not anymore.
So that experience basically removed any fear of death because you've experienced the other side.
Yeah. And I began to realize that death and dying is a process that I was already going through, like maybe a job failure or an illness or some kind of divorce or issue in my life. He began to show me that all of these are deaths and dyings.
Losses,
And so he said these are all part of your many deaths and your many dying. So whenever people, even though people have not had a near-death experience, if they can just look at the times of their lives where they've been in a car wreck, or their children leave them, or their spouse leaves them, or they get fired from their job and they get laid off. All of these are meant to express the same thing. They're all near-death experiences.
Okay. Now, after you experienced the Father and you got information transfer or download or whatever it was, after that, you said you met. Did you meet any other spiritual beings or angels or Jesus or how and all? And during this time, I assume you're just at peace or whatever, and you're not thinking about the fact that you're physically dead.
Well, he mentioned going to Egypt. So I mean, there's this time when he had the
NDE.
But there's also been other times.
Right.
So
I'm just talking about during the NDE, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, at this point, and then we'll go to the other. So what after you met the Father, then what did you experience next and before you came back into your body?
The Father, he left suddenly. There was no warning, and when he left, then I was in complete blackness. And maybe it's somewhat related to the black tunnel that some people have described in their own NDE. Sure. And I was floating through the blackness and had no point of reference. There was no sense that, at least at the gray screen, I had a sense that I was standing on a floor as we are normally used to. But after the Father left, I had a sense of not being able to stand anywhere. I was just floating through. In my mind, I thought it was outer space somewhere. And so in the blackness, I got a little frightened, and I said to myself, well, there's no reason to be frightened. How bad can this be? Because I was just with the Father.
Sure.
So I began to think about faith. I had faith that everything would work out in the blackness. And so that's why faith, I think the Apostle says, is three things that last: faith, hope, and love. And so the faith and the hope I really needed in that blackness. And as soon as I mentally worked on remembering faith, at that exact moment, my feet landed on solid ground, and I was able to stand and look up. I had a sense that I was on a planet somewhere in total blackness. I knew it was not Earth. Sure. And way out in the sky was a small white star. And I began to look at that star as possibly my hope, my saving help. So I kept staring at it, and the star grew bigger, brighter, and finally it was over the planet, and it was actually a white, luminous cross that was maybe the size of a couple football fields.
Wow.
And the light was different than the light we have on Earth. It was light that kind of slices through the darkness, almost like a knife does. And then the next thing that happened was Christ morphed off the cross, came down to the ground where I was, and he stood behind me, like we often do. We stand behind and we give someone a hug, and he hugged me and squeezed me, and it was really like all the hugs we get as kids, but I'd say more like millions of times that, all in a hug.
And you knew that was Christ.
And I kept telling Christ, I said to him, I said, a day in your presence is better than 1,000 elsewhere. And I repeated that over and over to him. And then I told him I wanted to stay there right in his arms. And as I was saying that, I arrived back in my body.
Wow.
All right, so tell us about the other experiences you've had since then with this type of seeing spirits or whatever.
Yeah, so you woke up in your body, and then your life was changed and so forth, and you'd obviously had this experience. Got your medical problems dealt with from the arrhythmia, and then other experiences you've had since then have been of a spiritual nature, correct? Of a supernatural nature. Okay.
I keep a journal. My home church, St. Paul's in Los Angeles. That same day of the near death, I was at daily service, and after service I broke down in the back behind the altar after the service with the priest that said it, and said the service, and I told Father Ed what had happened. So he was friends with a priest in Malibu who was making a movie about NDE people, and immediately 3 days later I was sitting in that priest's office telling him what I'm sharing with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up meeting with him once a month for 5 years.
Wow.
And it was through Father Frank, that I kept a journal. So I've had a journal from day one in 2005, and I just keep a journal of all these experiences. And Father Frank, as I each month would update him, he was always amazed at how this story unfolded of these out-of-body experiences. Sometimes I would have visions, or I'd be wide awake, and something would happen of an appearance. And so luckily I had this spiritual advisor to be able to share this, because, guys, I had no one to talk about this with. And I would have thought I was going crazy had I not had someone like Father Frank who was able to say, oh yeah, that so-and-so, that happened to them in the 1500s, or oh yeah, I've heard of that. It was great to have at least somebody there saying that,
Sure.
You're not going crazy.
Well, just to regress a little bit, the Apostle Paul likely had this happen to him, and NDE is described in the Bible that he was taken up into third heaven, and basically he describes an NDE. I mean, he had just gotten beaten, physically, and so he had a time where he was clinically dead. So these things have happened through history, and when I would imagine when something like this happens, you can't just talk to anybody about this because they think you got to be kidding me. You're making it up, or you're crazy, or right. I mean, you're saying you experienced God and Jesus Christ, and you were in a spiritual realm. That's not something that people are going to be easily able to understand.
All right, I got one more question on
the
this
NDE
topic.
part. Yeah,
on the NDE part, and that is, tell us about you said you went to Egypt, so tell us a little bit about the different trips that you've made, spiritually.
Is it like remote viewing? Is that what it's like, or just separate from your body? Yeah.
Yeah, there was no warning, and to this very day, there's no warning. I never know when it's going to happen, but I have, in prayer, I've communicated to the Lord that it's okay with me if he, just to give him my feeling on if and when it happens. I've said to him that if you need me to do something, I just want you to know that I'm okay with these events. I'm not afraid of them, and if he needs something to be done, please feel free to send me. So I think part of it was maybe just me coming to the point where I could say, not my will, but your will be done. And that took a little bit of help with my spiritual advisor to get to that point, to just say, this is okay, Lord. You can do with me what you will. And I think once I had that talk and that prayer, it kind of opened up the doors more for to be sent to do and to help in his work. One event had happened a few years ago after the near death. I remember it was around 6 a.m. I had just looked at the clock and was thinking, I got to get up right now and get to morning service and then start my day. And as I was thinking that, I fell back asleep, and then instantly I was in either Savannah, Georgia, or one of those coastal towns like Charleston, and I was in the old district of the town. And I recognized the architecture, so I knew it was Atlantic coast, and it was in that area there. Which, interestingly, that's where my mom and dad retired, was to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So I was already familiar with that area by visiting them.
So you're out of body then?
I was out of body on a downtown street, a side street where the old homes are. And I had my shirt on, which has the cross and the shield of our after I finished seminary, our religious community. And so I had the shirt on, which I had slept in that night. And I was walking down the street, and when somebody saw my shirt, the person said to please go about another block. They said that there was something terrible, and that they were hearing coming from the house. And they said that house needs you. They need God. And sure enough, I walked about a block and went through the side gate, the old black iron gate. So I walked through it, and in the side yard there were these terrible screams coming out of the second floor of the house. And so I just called up. The window was open. I called up. I said, do you need any help? And here a guy puts his head out the window, and he said, my friend is being possessed. He said, I've never seen this happen before. And evidently there was some kind of demonic attack on this man that was in the house, and his friend did not know what to do about it. And finally they brought the guy to the window for me to see them, because they saw that I had the cross on my shirt, and they said to help. And as soon as they said that, a demon leaped out of the window in the form of like a werewolf and came charging right at me. And I just stood there like, just in the name of Christ, I said, you have no authority. And I said, you have to leave. And as soon as I did that, the atmosphere became calm. The attack ended, and they brought the man down to me to the side yard, and they told me what had happened, that he came under this attack. So I prayed with them. We held hands. We prayed together. I blessed them, and then I said, do you guys go to church on Sunday? And they said, no. And I said, that's your problem right there. I said, if you're not going to church on Sunday, I said, you need God to protect your lives from these kinds of things. I said, promise me one thing, that you will go to church this Sunday. And they were probably in their 30s or 40s, these guys. And the next thing I knew, I was back in California. I was back in my bed. I woke up and had a normal day after that.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, since we're running close on time, let's talk a little bit about what you do now. Since the NDE, your life changed. Tell us a little bit about your work that you do now. Just kind of briefly what you do.
Just briefly, a few nights after the NDE, I was in my home office. It was about 7 o'clock at night, and I heard a loud voice about the tone we're talking right now, and no one was there with me. It was just an empty room, but I heard a voice, and the voice said, "Go help the homeless." And at that time, in downtown Los Angeles, we were having a homeless problem. There were thousands, and to this very day, that's the way it is. There's tens of thousands of homeless in that area. So I had heard that, and immediately the next day, I was because I heard the talk from the Father about being duty and dutiful. I immediately the next day I followed through with that voice command to help the homeless. So now to this very day, I started a community. We're called Servants of the Father of Mercy, and now we have about 200 lay people who volunteer. We deliver food, water, clothes to the homeless.
All right. What happens to the homeless over time? Do they ever become non-homeless, or
more functional in society?
More functional.
Or,
how does one become homeless?
We don't have a lot of homeless population here in Kentucky, to be honest. Yeah,
no,
we're not familiar with that. Yeah.
The situation with the homeless is the Lord began to show me that they were a sign, an image, and a symbol of Himself, because the homeless, we will always have them with us.
Sure.
Is what the Lord began to show me, because He said they're signs, they are an image, and they're a symbol they're a microcosm of Christ Himself, because Christ left His home in heaven, the apostle told me, and so He leaves His home in heaven, He becomes homeless, and then He's born homeless in a manger, and then they become homeless when they go on the flight to Egypt. And then their ministry as disciples, they were all homeless during those years.
Sure.
And then one day He told me that he was even homeless when he died, because they had to borrow a tomb for him. And so He began to show me that that the homeless we're always going to have with us, because they are there to test the rest of us, to test our ability to recognize Christ. So the homeless that we have now, they're tests for the rest of us to see if we would even recognize Christ.
I see. So when He talks about loving your neighbor as yourself, the second part of the command, carry the message and love your neighbor, He's saying to see the Christ consciousness or see Christ in other people. That's basically what
Well,
you're
yeah,
saying.
and he said, even if you give this water or this food or this clothes, if you do it for the least of
Right.
these, you've done it for me. So he does have sound bites there in the Gospels where he equates himself with the homeless, with the poorest of the poor. So
Yes.
he allows this group of people to always exist because he says the poor you will always have with you, but nobody thinks much. I never did. Why does he say that? Is it fatalism? What's the deal? Why does he say that? And now I realize, he's just saying, I'm always going to have them there because I'm always testing you.
Sure. I mean, that's true. They always have been with us. And,
My final question is, what is the best thing that we can do to help the homeless not be homeless, or at least reduce their suffering? What is the thing that we should be doing?
Sure. What's the message that we should have?
I think the message is a lot of people always say, well, Brother Gary helps the homeless. I said, well, that's true and that's not true. I said, what we do, is we help middle class and wealthy people to go to heaven. I said, that's what we do.
Yeah.
I said, because the homeless can take care of themselves. They have God on their side. I said, but what we do is we give middle-class, wealthy people invitations to come
serve,
with us,
huh?
and
Yeah.
to serve.
Sure.
And when we give this invitation, the more invitations that we can give, and the more people that say yes, God has a chance to test and try their hearts so that they can be heaven-bound.
So the message should be that we should see the homeless as people who need assistance, who need help, like the Good Samaritan story, and like what Jesus said, what you do to the least of these, and that those are opportunities for us to serve others, and He'll see it as serving Him. Okay.
We have a chance to really pass, the test of this life. The test of this life is, from what I know now, is that the test is the parable story of the wicked servant. That here the Lord shows us through that parable. Well, you have a need for mercy. You want mercy, but you also have to show it in order for the cycle to exist. And so now I begin to realize, well, these homeless are really a chance for us to show the Lord that, yes, I want mercy. I'm thanking you for my salvation by grace. But at the same time, Lord, I'm just not going to be all about me. I'm going to also give back some of this mercy.
I wanted to say, to piggyback on that a minute, with that parable, we're called to reflect. I think one way to say it is to reflect the mercy shown to us, or the forgiveness shown to us that God has shown us. We're to show that same kind of mercy and forgiveness to other people so that we reflect what was given us. The wicked servant didn't reflect what was given to him, and he went out and would not forgive the man who owed him much less, for those who don't remember the parable. But that's what's about. Yeah.
Well, we're out of time. So do you have any final statements or questions for Dr. Andy?
Now that we mentioned, the wicked servant parable, I think the story of Lazarus and the rich man also ties in nicely to this whole message. And so that would be a great takeaway for people to read that story of Lazarus and the rich man, because, here Lazarus did not want to see that homeless poor man, but that's exactly what he needed to do in order for him to land a place in heaven,
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think that's a good way to wind it up. And I like this. I like the theme of this message, moving towards, your life was changed to really show mercy. We talk about mercy ministries, but your life was changed to really show mercy to others from the experience you had on the other side. So, and you have no fear of dying because you've experienced it. You believe that without any question it exists. And we like to make that point on this show.
Okay, let's.
Well, and real quick, Doug asked, well, how do I know this was a real experience? Well, when all of a sudden you're now out there helping homeless people and hugging people that are smelly, dirty, and all of a sudden you're doing something you've never done before, I think these are all signs that something happened to this person,
Absolutely. Well, Brother Gary, I really appreciate you being on the show today and spending this time with us. And we've enjoyed interviewing you and hearing your NDE story and how your life's been changed. And we thank God for the work that you're doing with the needy and the helpless in California. And you are in Los Angeles, correct? Or Hollywood area?
Yeah.
Okay. And I will continue to stay in touch with you. I've really enjoyed talking with you. And we'll get back with you and maybe have you back on the show again if you're willing. I thank you for being here.
Thank you, Gary.
Oh, God bless you guys and all that you're doing.
Okay, thanks for your story. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So this is God Talk, where we rightly divine the line between science and faith.
Please visit our website at godtalk.com. Our audio files can be found on iTunes, SoundCloud, and many other podcast platforms. You can find all of our God Talk videos by searching Dr. Andy and Doug on YouTube. Please visit our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/Dr. Andy and Doug. Thank you for listening.